Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So which professor did you hate the most? When we met, I think you had just transferred from HUC, right, to Ziegler. Remember that correctly?
No.
No, I'm totally making that
You're
up.
remembering somebody else's bio.
Remember somebody else's bio. So
No, in fact, I very much chose Ziegler. It was
Ziegler?
the only school I applied to.
all right. So let's start at the very beginning, which is a very good place to start. So what started you on this journey? What brought you along this journey to be rabbi? Be a spiritual leader.
A kind of unsatisfying answer is what's most true, which is God. Which I feel like in Christian settings, people would probably just nod and be like, oh, right, of course, because God calls people to do things. And in Jewish settings, they're like, oh, like that's anthropomorphic. God doesn't speak. I mean, I believe it. I'm a spiritual. I'm not religious. What do you mean God? But, okay, yes, agree, I'm right there with you. And when the course of events in your life lead you to realize there is a professional outlet for the things that you love and that you have role models that are showing you how to do something beautiful and meaningful and important that uplifts and helps people, and you think to yourself, wow, I'd love to do that. I could do that. I will do that. That's basically the story. I was talking to Sid's wife over here over dinner, and there were not like clues in my Jewish upbringing that would have led a person to think that I would have been a rabbi. My parents certainly were horrified by the prospect when I told them a year into Stanford University that was what I intended to do. My grandma, Alice Heydemann, may her memory be a blessing, her words were, what a waste of an education. But the good news is that despite all of that family background and baggage, both of my grandmas had similar opinions about organized religion and about Judaism and about for their different reasons. And so therefore neither of my parents grew up with any Jewish practice whatsoever. And so it was like a big move for them to choose to send me to a Reform synagogue for a religious school. And when I went through like the requisite rebellious phase when I was 18, 19, when I thought I was going to be religious and like super religious and be Orthodox and raise an Orthodox family and have 8 children and like show my parents how much they got wrong. And I said to my mom, like, I can't believe, like, I didn't even know what day Shabbat was on. You raised me eating bacon, like, all these things. And she was like, okay, stop. You should thank me that, like, we didn't celebrate Christmas. That's what you should thank me that we, so anyway, all of that is background. This is important, though. The rabbi in the synagogue in which I grew up, Rabbi Arnold Jacob Wolf, may his memory be a blessing, he was like a gadol, like a luminary of the Reform movement. I didn't know that. I was a kid, but he cultivated the children in the synagogue in a really beautiful way. Like he cultivated the minds of all of us. He challenged us. I was lucky enough to have grown up for the first few years of being a kid in that synagogue. Max Janowski was the cantor of KAM Israel, the synagogue I grew up in. So for the people who didn't go, ooh, he was like, he's the guy who wrote like all the iconic music, sung, Avinu Malkeinu, he wrote that, but he was the cantor of KAM from apparently 1938 to the early 2000s or something insane like that. Maybe not the early 2000s, but like I was a kid in the 80s there, and he was the cantor there through my childhood. And then finally, I was taught to play guitar by this, PhD student who was the youth director at KAM, who got his PhD from the University of Chicago and left, and he needed a successor, and so he kind of chose me. I was a sophomore in high school, and he was sort of like, you know, you could stand up in front of a room and hold a guitar and play in front of children. And so he taught me how to play guitar so that I could, you know, take his place as the song leader in the shul. And just like as a sidebar, his name is Dr. Andrew Rayfeld. He now is the chancellor and president of HUC, Hebrew Union College, JR in New York. So I just had this weird, like, luck of the draw, time and place kind of circumstance. But all of the people in those environments, like, paid attention to the kids and cultivated talent, you know? So it was like both an accident of birth and also people were really, they were great Jewish educators. Yeah. Yeah. And then Rabbi Noah Kushner at Stanford.
Noah was at Stanford at the time.
That's right. She was like a year or two out of school, and she told me I needed to lead services. And I said, but I don't know how to lead services. And she said, I will teach you. And then she just kind of like pushed me in front of a room full of people. And I remember this well. It was alumni weekend, and so there were a lot of people who were in the room, and I was like, you know, not friends with any of them. And then I did a bunch of things wrong. And my mom happened to be there that weekend too. And she will still, if you get her going on alumni weekend, my freshman year, the first time I led services, she will say, and then there was that woman who was so rude and she was so mean to you when you did that thing, which wasn't wrong. And I'm like, it is wrong to do the Shema before the Baruch Hu, Mom. It is. It's like, it's not the order. Shut up, you're wrong. It was fine. You know, anyway.
I love how it actually took somebody pointing out that you were wrong for your mom to turn into your greatest rabbinic defender.
That's right.
I really
That is
appreciate
right.
it. That was like the moment.
I mean, 100%.
Yeah.
No, they became great supporters.
Wow, amazing.
Yes.
So we both had the benefit of being part of IKAR, founded and led by Rabbi Sharon Brous in Halcyon days, right? It wasn't just that we were in this amazing place, but we were also in this amazing place that was coming to be. And something about that time was like very real and very fresh. And I think my question is twofold for you. I promise not to ask you a two-parter, but that's the Adat Shalom way. The first is for you, like, what was it like being First Sharon student? You know, what was it like being in that environment? And also, I think my question is, like, did that experience or other experiences in rabbinical school change your trajectory? Were there things that opened up to you that you hadn't seen before when you walked through the door?
Yes. I'm trying to think of where to start. When I interviewed at Ziegler, I asked if they had a music program or a cantorial program. And one of the administrators looked at me and she said, honey, if that's important to you, you should go to RRC, the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College.
Afterwards, you can tell me who said that.
Uh-huh.
Quietly.
I mean, and I thought to myself, like, lady, are you crazy? Like, you want this. You want to convince me to come to your school. But she was being honest. And then she said to me, you will need to supplement school. It will be a mistake if you think school is your be-all and end-all of education. It is very important that you find places to intern, to work, to attend that supplement your education here. This is not enough. And Rabbi Scott and I were talking a little bit last night about rabbinical school and, you know, all the faults people find with school. But I think one of the reasons why people tend to find fault is because maybe they want too much out of the school experience. And I went in with open eyes that, you know, rabbinical school was not the be-all and end-all. It was a place to get ordained as a rabbi while I actually studied, you know, at the feet of great rabbis, probably in synagogues outside of the school. So that became Sharon Brous at IKAR. I would honestly say the most important thing I learned there is that you can start something new. You know what I mean? That things don't have to be the way they are. Now, part of her Torah is, the justice Torah, that there is the world as it is and the world as it could be, and we always have to imagine the world as it could be, and Shabbat is a time to come together to practice living in a world as it could be, a world of joy and harmony and, feeding each other and taking care of each other and uplifting each other and studying and learning and, imagining what is possible, and then 6 days a week you work in the world as it is, toward the world as it could be. But like, in point of fact, actually this was a synagogue that wasn't, and then it came to be, And in starting Mishkan, that was like the Magna Carta, It was like, this is the thing that lets me know that it's possible. I hadn't yet read Rabbi Sid's book, Finding a Spiritual Home. I didn't know about Adat Shalom. It turns out what Rabbi Sharon did is not exactly new. Like, if there's a synagogue in America, it was started at some point by some enterprising group of people who needed a synagogue. And they founded, literally every synagogue. And I learned at some point that all the names of synagogues, especially in the same city, that are breakoffs of one another, often are critiques of the other synagogues. So like,
And they often have shalom in the name.
That's right.
Present company.
That's right. Exactly.
Present company accepted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway. What about you? What do you feel like you took away from your experience at IKAR?
I just didn't know that was possible. I didn't know you could do it that way. The first is that I used to watch Sharon sort of wind herself up before davening, and it was watching this sort of sprint, intense spiritual spring, and then she would then services would start, and it was this incredible explosion. And I didn't know that you could have a place that was serious about justice and serious about Torah and serious about davening at the same time. I thought that prayer was sort of a series of compromises to make people happy. Sharon was completely uninterested in compromise.
That's right, yeah.
About that. And then I heard her speak, and the thesis that if it's not uplifting human dignity, it's not Torah, was just something that was so simple and powerful. I just had never seen something that clear before. But I think my question back to you is this, is we also watched, we watched what it was like to build something new, which is why I'm a little surprised why you decided to go and do it, because she was up to 3, 4 in the morning.
That was her choice.
Yeah, that's true, that she, I think, preferred that. But I think, one of my questions is when you went to go build Mishkan, what were the spiritual and other questions? What were the foundational questions that you were trying to answer by creating this new community?
So on a very selfish level, I was 29 and single and interested in Judaism, deeply, practicing Judaism, interested in Judaism, being part of a Jewish community, being part of a justice community, and, politically and socially progressive. And I wanted to live in Chicago, not LA, where I was living. And I looked around and I talked to my friends from high school who were, my friends who went to KM with me, who were still in Chicago. And I said, where do you go to find Torah, inspiration, justice, community with people your own age? And they just looked at me like, the hell is the matter with you? Who would do that? Why would anybody do that? When I have kids, one day I'll do that. But it was like they didn't even understand the question. Do you know what I mean? And so that just showed me there was room for what you and I came to know in LA. There was room in Chicago. And by that point, Romamu existed in New York. B'nai Jeshurun had already been doing their thing for, 2 decades, 3 decades. There were models of ecstatic, spiritual, inclusive, progressive Jewish spaces all over the place, but they had not yet hit the Midwest. And it was fun. Actually, as I talked to people, some people said, machers in the Jewish community in Chicago, they were like, it sounds like what you're describing is very coastal, I was like, so I was like, well, I guess I'm bringing LA to Chicago, But, it was also very, Mishkan is very Chicago. First of all, it's called Mishkan Chicago. I am from Chicago. I grew up there. All of these different spaces, including Mishkan, including Adat Shalom, including IKAR, including Romamu, are very, they are very located in place. you know? And all of us were, you know, dependent at the beginning on foundations to support us. Like none of us had big $100,000 donors who were, you know, making the place go. All of us were dependent on foundations that sort of looked at this little upstart helping young adults connect to Judaism and maybe each other, and helped fund us. But every single one of us had to deal with the question of, what's your plan for scaling? Can you imagine? Like you're starting a spiritual community and it's like, but how could you be more like McDonald's? You know? Anyway, the question was how to create what IKAR built in LA, a spiritual community that was resonant, that felt attractive to young adults, but primarily like people I wanted to hang out with, that I wanted to pray in. How could I create that spiritual community? So that was the primary animating question. But I understood I was also tapping into a need that was a national phenomenon, a national trend. I mean, Mishkan, as you know, along with the other Jewish Emergent Network communities and plenty of other upstart communities, were responding to a moment on the American Jewish scene that brought a critique not unlike what Abraham Joshua Heschel was bringing in the 50s, looking at the emergence of the American synagogue and saying, you know, has the synagogue become the graveyard where prayer is buried? That like literal quote from Abraham Joshua Heschel, you know, like what is Judaism? It's stiff, it's inorganic, it's, you know, it's just people reciting words. They're freeze-dried. Like where's the life? Where's the nourishment? Where's the adventure of the soul? And that was the other question, so.
This is a bit of a tangent, but related, which is I feel like if you're doing something right and you're doing it well within the Jewish community, someone is going to be really upset with you about it. When I was at Six, like really upset with you. I remember at Six and I, we once got a postcard back, and the Six and I was a community that was appealing specifically to people in their 20s and 30s. Right, yeah. Part of the mission statement. And they had, this was someone who was not in their 20s and 30s, and they had cut out all the 20s and 30s stuff just to show it was available to them. And they sort of sent it to our executive director, and they were like, here. My second week there, I got yelled at for destroying the seminaries because we were a non-movement organization. So I'm asking you, before all these lovely human beings, what are some of the best insults you received early on about how you were going to destroy Judaism as you were building Mishkan?
So, first of all, I want to say, I don't know if this is because Chicago is in the Midwest and so people are friendly and Midwestern, but you know, the origin story of IKAR, of Romamu, of the kitchen in San Francisco involves a lot of high-level people in and around Federation professionals trying to shut down these upstart communities. You know, like these rabbis are dangerous. They're, you know, disturbing the status quo of the city, you know, like they can't be allowed to do this. And that did not happen to me in Chicago.
Oh my God, that's so nice to hear.
Yeah, like it also might be, I talked to everybody. I wasn't trying to be secretive about this. I was like, I'm here and I'd like to do something, you know, and people for the most part, because it was catering to young adults, and young adults don't tend to pay money for things. It's not like synagogues were like, oh no, we're gonna lose membership dollars. They were like, oh, please take our young adults who eat our food and don't pay for it. So, you know, so that was the original, you know, and we hosted Mishkan in Anshe Emet Synagogue, which is a large conservative synagogue. Do you know it? You grew up there. Well, I am pleased to be able to say nothing negative about it. Rabbi Michael Siegel was incredibly generous, and you know, he was one of the many people I talked to, and I said, hi, I want to do a thing in Chicago, and he said, how can we help you? Can I provide you space? And so for the first like 8 years of Mishkan before the pandemic, once a month, like clockwork, we were always at Anshe Emet Synagogue. Actually, before we had our own 501c3 designation, he let their bookkeeper do accounting for us. So Anshe Emet was our fiscal sponsor for the first year. People wrote checks to Anshe Emet with Mishkan in the memo line, and they just kept a little, you know, cash of our money. It wasn't a lot, but it was a very generous thing to do so that people could make tax-exempt donations. I was also told before I moved back to Chicago, make a donation to the Federation. You just want to be on their good side. So, okay, I did that. And I think like a number of just conscientious moves on my part, and the fact that we were not doing bar and bat mitzvahs right away made us seem less threatening to the status quo. When we started doing bar and bat mitzvahs, there was one rabbi of a major synagogue in the city that sat me down at a no longer existing but very intimidating urban Jewish country club with his synagogue president and treasurer. It was like a mafia meeting to try to get me to back down on bar and bat mitzvahs, and anyway, like all's well that ends well. They're doing fine. We're doing fine. But that happened. Wow. There was, at the beginning, radically inclusive is one of our taglines, and I feel like 13 years ago, that was not something you heard everywhere. And 13 years ago, the LGBTQ inclusivity sort of movement had not really taken off in the Jewish community. Nobody was talking about Jews of color. Interfaith relationships were still, the conservative movement continues to not allow rabbis to do interfaith marriages, but interfaith family was just getting started, what is now called 18 Doors. It was, all of this was very nascent. And so to have a community that was radically inclusive and explicitly about creating community for those populations that were not represented adequately or representatively in synagogues in the numbers in which they actually exist in the Jewish community, also young adults, that's what we meant by radically inclusive. But somebody did write to me, and I remember this because I just thought it was so hilarious. He said, you call yourself radically inclusive, and I like the way I feel when I come to Mishkan, but I'm Orthodox, and so I need a woman to not be leading services or playing guitar, and so you're not really radically inclusive because I can't come.
God bless.
Can't please everybody.
Can't please everyone.
Yeah.
I actually really appreciate, because that is the most Talmudic argument I have ever heard in my entire life about, okay. So I'm not sure what to say about the 15 years that we've, roughly since we were ordained, because, and like you said, it does feel like many things that are full-fledged today were nascent then. Outreach work, inclusivity, reaching out to Jews of color, what it meant. There was plenty of interfaith work going on, but it hadn't yet gained the sort of wide-scale celebration that it now does in the community. I remember one of our colleagues soon after ordination, forgive me for just sort of saying this is neither to endorse nor to oppose, but he mentioned to me, he was a very out there person, but he mentioned to me that he'd written himself a divorce from Israel, because he had very complicated feelings about it. And at the time, I couldn't even, there wasn't even a category, a box in my head to put this into. And now we both know many people soon to be ordained who would describe themselves as anti-Zionists. And so maybe the world hasn't changed, but it's certainly been pulled into much more painful relief. So I think what I want to ask you is, what is our job in this moment? I understand there's no way to fully answer that question, but how has your thinking shifted or changed about our holy work, and how has it stayed exactly the same?
If we had more time, I really would love to hear what all of you think our job is. And maybe over Kiddush tomorrow, instead of small talk, where are you from and what do you do for a living? You'll tell me what you think but especially Rabbi Scott's job is.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The check is not in the mail for that.
The Friday night after Trump got elected in 2016, I remember looking around the room, and it was standing room only. People were sitting on the floor and sitting on each other's laps, and it was just the room was packed to the gills. And, I went to rabbinical school because I love Judaism. I love to sing. I love studying Torah. I love teaching. I did not, we have colleagues who went into rabbinical school because they didn't hack it in politics. But ultimately what they wanted to be was a politician, and being a rabbi gives you a pulpit. It gives you a place to say stuff from and tell people what the truth is. And that was not why I went into this work. And honestly, I went into it because it was fun. This is fun you could probably tell, I'm having fun, I don't think a person could stay in this job if they're not having fun. But it occurred to me that night as I looked at the crowd, the practice of Judaism is about survival. It's about spiritual survival in a world that is unpredictable and dangerous and hard to live in. It's not only about that, but it is about that. And I don't think I'd really considered how important that piece of this tradition is, because I'd had a privileged life, and I still do, and I wasn't totally joking about, when I said well, it's Sharon's choice to stay up until 3 a.m. answering emails and writing sermons. I think part of our job in a world that is relentlessly, relentlessly changing, but also at this point really kind of constructed to wear us down with chaos and news and challenge and bad news, and the algorithms are set up to draw us into conflict, and I really think our job is to help all of us rise above that, see that for what it is, disengage from that at least one day a week, on the Holy Shabbos, remind ourselves what real relationships and conversations feel like, what civil relationships and conversations feel like. Jews love the fact that Judaism is full of multiple voices and disagreements, but don't say the wrong thing about Israel, in a Jewish crowd, right? That's the thing that, rabbis get fired over. And I think part of what we are here to do is reacclimate, reintroduce Jewish people to the actual traditions of Judaism, which include robust, vigorous debate and disagreement, and not always ending up on the same page. In fact, more often than not ending up on the same page and coexisting on the page together, and then davening Ma'ariv together, and then having Kiddush together, and having our kids play with each other, and respecting that people, reasonable people can see things differently. Those are a few things that I think we're here to do. But I also think in a world that digitally is really becoming more illusory and full of false information and relationships and isolation, the kind of all of us getting drawn into whatever, the digital world that is so satisfying until it's over, and then you're where did the last 3 hours of my life go that I'm never going to get back? I'm 3 hours closer to death now, and what did I just do? And and I really think part of what we are here to do is have real community, build real in-person community where we are here to support and uplift and take care of one another and say amen to each other's Kaddish and go to each other's Shivas and, sing harmony that we can all hear in each other's ears. There's no replacement for that. You can't do that, you can't do that digitally. You have to be in a community. And I there are so few places now where that's possible, so thank you.
I think beautiful words on which to end.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi Sid, and to Sandy, in honor of your father of blessed memory. Thank you to this whole community, to Jeff, to Tom, to Michael, to Beth, to, where's Mark, to Rena and Sarah, and our amazing facility staff, Alma and Elizabeth, for making dinner tonight happen. And to all of you, Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi Lizzi will be back tomorrow, leading with our kids, leading services with us here, actually singing at the end of services, and then even after Oneg, doing some teaching and singing together in the social hall. If you loved singing at camp, you'll love this, and we love you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbos!